There's something people don't understand about the ones who prefer being alone. They assume it's sadness. They assume it's social failure. They assume it's rejection. But what if it's none of those things? What if choosing solitude isn't a sign of something missing, but a sign of something different? Because here's the truth. Some people don't feel drained by crowds. They feel drained by pretending, and being alone is the only place they don't have to perform. Let's start with something simple. Humans are social creatures. That's biology. Our brains are wired for connection. When we bond with others, we release oxytocin. When we laugh together, dopamine spikes. Belonging feels good. So when someone says they prefer being alone, it almost sounds like they're rejecting something fundamental, but that assumption is flawed. Because preferring solitude doesn't mean rejecting connection. It means being selective about it. Psychologists have long studied the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is painful. It's the feeling of disconnection you don't want. Solitude, on the other hand, is chosen. It's restorative, and the brain reacts to them differently. Studies show that people who enjoy solitude often have stronger activation in regions associated with self-referential thinking and creativity. When they're alone, their minds don't spiral, they expand. For some people, silence feels empty. For others, silence feels full. Here's where it gets interesting. People who prefer being alone often score high in introversion, but introversion isn't what most people think it is. It's not shyness. It's not social anxiety. It's about stimulation. Extroverts gain energy from external stimulation, conversations, environments, activity. Introverts are more sensitive to dopamine. Their nervous systems reach stimulation thresholds faster. So while an extrovert might feel energized at a crowded party, an introvert's brain is already overstimulated. It's not that they hate people, it's that their brain is processing more. Every conversation, every facial expression, every background noise, it all registers deeply. And after a while, that depth becomes exhausting. Being alone isn't isolation, it's recalibration. But there's another layer that goes deeper than personality type. Some people prefer being alone because it gives them control. In social settings, you can't control outcomes. You can't control how others interpret you. You can't control unpredictability. When you're alone, your environment is predictable. There's safety in that. For people who grew up in chaotic households or environments where emotions were unpredictable, solitude can feel like stability. No tension, no guessing, no walking on eggshells, just space. Psychologists sometimes link a strong preference for solitude to early self-reliance. If you learned early that you had to handle things yourself, being alone doesn't feel foreign. It feels natural. You don't experience solitude as absence. You experience it as autonomy. And autonomy is powerful. But here's something that might surprise you. People who prefer being alone are often deeply empathetic. That sounds contradictory, but when you process emotions intensely, constant social exposure can become overwhelming. You absorb moods, you notice subtle shifts in tone, you pick up on tension others miss, and that data doesn't just disappear, it stays. So being alone becomes a way to regulate. It's not antisocial, it's emotional recovery. Another fascinating aspect is creativity. Research consistently shows that periods of solitude enhance creative thinking. When you're alone, your brain's default mode network activates more freely. Without constant external input, your internal world grows louder. And some people prefer that internal world, not because reality is bad, but because their inner landscape is rich. They can think for hours, reflect, build ideas, replay insights, design futures. To someone who doesn't experience that richness, solitude looks boring. To them, it's expansive. But let's talk about the darker side for a moment. Sometimes preferring to be alone isn't about preference, it's about protection. If you've been betrayed, misunderstood, judged, or repeatedly disappointed, your brain learns patterns. It says social interaction equals risk, so it reduces exposure. This isn't weakness, it's adaptive learning. The brain is always trying to minimize pain. And if connection once meant rejection, solitude feels safer. That doesn't mean someone is broken, it means they adapted. The key difference lies in this question. Does being alone feel peaceful, or does it feel heavy? If it feels peaceful, it's preference. If it feels heavy, it might be avoidance. Now here's something people rarely talk about. Those who prefer being alone often have a strong internal dialogue. They think deeply, they analyze, they self-reflect, they examine their own motives. And that level of introspection builds self-awareness. While others are constantly distracted by noise, they're observing their own patterns. They notice when they're triggered. They notice when they're changing. They notice something feels off. That awareness can look like distance, but it's actually depth. Another psychological element is independence of validation. When you spend more time alone, you become less reliant on constant external feedback. Your sense of identity becomes internally anchored. You're not constantly adjusting to group opinions. You're deciding for yourself. That doesn't mean you don't care what people think. It means your self-concept isn't built entirely from it. And that's rare. But here's the paradox. The same people who prefer being alone often crave meaningful connection, just not shallow connection. Small talk drains them. Surface-level interaction feels empty. They don't want 10 acquaintances. They want one real conversation. And because that's harder to find, they choose solitude over mediocrity. To some, that looks antisocial, but it's actually selective. In a world that glorifies constant visibility, constant sharing, constant socializing, choosing to be alone can almost feel rebellious. But it's not rebellion, it's alignment. Some nervous systems are built for stimulation, others are built for reflection. Neither is superior, they're just different human patterns. If you're someone who prefers being alone, understand this. You're not strange, you're not cold, you're not missing something fundamental. Your brain simply restores itself differently. You might thrive in depth over volume, quality over quantity, meaning over noise. And there's something quietly powerful about someone who is comfortable in their own company. Because if you can sit alone with your thoughts without needing distraction, you probably understand yourself better than most. This is human patterns, and sometimes the people who step back from the crowd are the ones who see it most clearly. If this resonated with you, you'll probably connect with the psychology of people who feel different from everyone else, because the roots overlap more than you think. I'll see you in the next one.